Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. This is Red Hot Talk, episode 24. And welcome back, Rod. And he's back from his holiday. And
Another
today,
one.
another one. And today, I think that you probably read the title. I'm very excited. I'm going to be very animated today, I think. And of course, there's all the new product announcements and more specifically, a brand new Micro Four Third camera. And I think it's one of the most highly anticipated camera for the year, and certainly excited within the Micro Four Third community, especially those in the Panasonic cam. Rod, let's start with you first. We're going to go for a few things today, and but let's start with the big thing. The G9. You were a G9 user, right?
That's right. There's just a couple of things about it that I couldn't quite get along with, so I don't have it anymore. But I was very interested to see what Panasonic was going to do with the G9 too, and it looks brilliant. Except there's no, except they've dropped the panel on the top, which I thought was one of the best things about the G9.
Yep, and we're certainly going to go through individual, items that I have here on the list here, and also, welcome back everybody to listening, and we're going to have a brilliant, lengthy, hopefully not too lengthy, discussions about the G9, and also, towards the end of today's live stream, we're going to touch base on OM System brand new camera as well, which is announced this morning, which is the latest TUF TG7 camera. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I guess, most of you will be more excited about the new Micro Four Third cameras as usual. And so we're going to go through that. So before we start today's conversation, I would like to ask all of you, whether you are a Panasonic user, whether you have used G9 before, and also, obviously, maybe towards the middle part of today's discussion, whether you are considering getting the latest G9 Mark II and why. That will be the questions. And because I think for lots of people who are shooting with a Micro Four Third platform or considering getting a Micro Four Third semi-pro or pro body, will be looking at either the OM1, the GX6, or maybe even now, of course, the G9 Mark II. So we're going to have a little bit discussion about these three cameras as well, just to have a little fun discussion to see whether you should be going with the OM system or the Panasonic, and for my opinion, why, and why not. So let's go back to the discussion now, Rod. And so you were a little bit disappointed when you saw the G9 design. Let's talk about the design. We're not talking about the hardware yet. And so you missed the top plate. The top LCD panel.
I felt the G9 was, I've seen it said by others before, was the best handling camera I've had. And it looks to me like the G9 2 has got essentially the same body as the S5, which is all right, but it's gone that mirrorless route of being all hard edges.
Yeah, they've gone with the Sony design theme, right? all the boxy, sharp angles and things like that.
Yeah. Not such a fan. I'm glad that it's got the extra resolution. I mean, it's nice. It's not the extra resolution in itself. It just gives me a bit more confidence if I want to shoot 3:2 ratio images or even 16:9. You just feel you're not losing quite as much.
Yeah.
But no, otherwise it looks great. Just a shame they couldn't have kept the old body.
Okay, yeah. I mean, let's talk a little bit about body design first, before we go into all the numbers and things like that. Because the original G9 was shaped and designed definitely more like a traditional DSLR. We have the slightly more contour, smoother design, which basically Olympus and OM System has always kept their kind of body design. Like the design language is always very similar. It has that kind of basically old style SLR type. The grip is certainly shaped more, I think, to me anyway, with my small hands, definitely feels a bit better when it comes to handling. And I give you an example here. If you've seen my previous vlogs in this channel, you would have seen me also complaining about the Panasonic GX6 grip and also the design. And I think that even though the G9 Mark II is more angular, more straight, the G6 maybe a little bit better in terms of the contour, but it's still very straight, very angular, and very sharp here. And I don't think that when I'm holding the camera, it feel anywhere near as good as the OM1 or any of the Olympus EM1 series for that matter. So I certainly think, the design has kind of gone a step backward. And I just saw some of you actually commented that the G9 Mark II is now basically using a full frame body but a micro four third camera. Well, in a sense, it is based on the S5 II. If you look at a lot of the images and also reviews out there already, just the only thing is different, obviously, is missing out the internal fan that the G5 Mark II has. And also added I think the joystick, which is also missing in the G and the S5 too. But essentially, it's the same shape, same form factor, literally the same dimensions. And not entirely sure about the weight, but yeah, there you go. You do have a full frame body in a micro four third. With a micro four third sensor in a full frame body.
658 grams.
658 grams.
Yeah,
which
that's
is actually,
it's quite hefty.
Yeah, it's quite a big thing. Yes,
I think in fairness, though, first of all, the S5 is not a big camera.
Yeah,
and also there's a limit to how small you can make a camera and still have it easy to handle.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people commenting online I've seen have jumped straight on the camera side saying, "Oh, it's micro four thirds and it's the size for a full frame camera. This is rubbish." But you have to remember, you can't use a camera without lenses.
no.
And any of the lenses you might use with the G9 II will be a fraction of the size of a full frame lens. Well, so you're talking about the size of the kit.
Exactly. You talk about the system size, not just the body size.
Yeah, of course.
Well, it's the same thing. If you go for the professional level full frame camera, they're going to be much bigger and heavier because they need to build to withstand knocks and bumps and things like that. And also just like the some of the comments I saw already, and heat dissipation if you're doing a lot of videoing, prolonged video shootings, especially the G9 II doesn't feature a fan, and that would mean that, and if you are going to do a lot of 4K 120, like 4K 60, like really long period of shooting non-stop, you need some sort of heat dissipations mechanisms or design within the actual body itself. This is why the G6 has a fan. But speaking of the fan, and even though that I don't have a problem with handling it, but I do find it quite difficult to fit into any of the bags that I have at the moment. I'm not joking. This thing is actually really chunky. If I try to put it side by side to the OM1, just for a quick second, and you can see exactly how much bigger the GX6 is compared to the OM1. I don't know if you guys can see that, and maybe here, and
maybe if you face them forward.
Face them forward.
So with the lens pointing at your camera, that might show it better, because the Lumix is quite tall in the body, isn't it?
Yes, it's probably quite hard to see, but I can definitely tell you
a little, yeah.
And it's taller and also definitely a lot thicker by comparison. Yeah. And that's the problem. A lot of my bags has kind of design around the micro four third, my usual micro four third setup, which is the Ohm system cameras, and the GX6 doesn't fit in any of those because it's so much thicker, and the body breadth itself. So I find it quite hard to actually put in a bag. I have to kind of force it in, and with the viewfinder rubber cup kind of pressing into the side of the camera bag, so it doesn't look too nice. So I'm not too happy about that in that regard. But other than that, it's okay. I can manage. But anyway, so that's enough for the S5 II body design. And how do you guys feel about what Rod's comment is about the missing top LCD screen? Because I think it's quite a nice feature to have. You can see the setting when you look down. You don't have to kind of look through the viewfinder or look at the back screen to check the settings at any one time. It's just definitely more of a photographer feature, which is, for some reasons, I think, find it a bit strange that Panasonic has omitted that feature, which is a lot of photographers find it valuable, and to check settings before they shoot. So it's a little bit strange to me that they have done that. And so I guess the design language, the Boxer design language, is a personal preference thing. If you're a Sony users or you're used to that sort of kind of Boxer design, you may be happy about that. And but for me, I think I personally would, in terms of looking wise and also handling wise, I'm definitely favoring the original G9, which is slightly more contour, smoother design than the newer boxy one. And now come to the big thing. And okay, before we going to the obviously the biggest shout out feature of the G9 Mark II, which is the face detection or the hybrid AF system, which basically contrast and face detect combined. And Rod, you tell me that you used G9 before. You told me that DFD is actually a fantastic system for still photography.
Well, I think so, but I don't think I'd shoot quite the same as you. I tend not to shoot in bursts with continuous AF. So most of my photographs are individual images rather than bursts. But I felt the G9's autofocus and focusing from near to far and focus transitions were just ridiculously fast and precise. I thought as a stills camera, the AF was quite exceptional. I know it's had a lot of criticism in continuous AF mode and for video, but that's only a small part of what I do. For regular photography, I thought the DFD system was just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean,
Fine,
I think
fine.
I think a lot of photographers or even like just general people who are looking for a camera has given too much a stick, in terms of DFD system, in terms of performance and how it goes. And I can guarantee, I mean, I can give you some of my personal experience now that I have the GX6 that I've been shooting for the last couple of months for all my professional jobs, and I can concur basically what Rod said. Point-to-point focus is actually very quick. And more importantly, very, very accurate. And the only thing that obviously when it comes to continuous focus and tracking, and that's when the problem starts. And when I set it to APS-C or even any sort of tracking, when the subject's moving towards me or away from me, or all I ever see from the EVF is this pulsing movement, and it's not only it's distracting, it's also it doesn't inspire any sort of confidence when I shoot, because I actually have absolutely no idea whether I nailed the shot or not. And because you can't stop in the middle of a sequence or in the middle of the action when my subject is moving around, so I can't check any sort of images whether I nailed the focus or not until the sequence is finished. And that means it could potentially I have to reshoot if none of these actions that I wanted to capture was in focus. So that's the downside of having DFD in continuous focus. And in that regards, any sort of camera system that has face detect, such as the OM1 or any of the EM1 series before that, has that. And for that, is brilliant. When the subject's moving around like that, and I can actually see the focusing transition smoothly without pausing, so I can actually see whether whether the camera is actually locking onto the subject or not, and to be able to take the shot and with confidence that, I definitely nailed that shot or near about, and without having to go through all the images again, because when you do an APS-C doing sequential shoot, you may be having 15, 20, maybe even 50 photographs. That means that when you stop the sequence, you have to go back to all these images and kind of inspect one individually, one at a time, and that could take you a lot of time to review the images before you think, okay, I got a shot now, let's move on to the next sequence. So that could be a problem in that regards. But point to point, yeah, Rod, you're right there. I think the DFD is actually very, very good. And I think the latest eye focus on the face detect within the Panasonic system also quite accurate and quite useful. And because the camera system also sees the faces when they're very far away, which I quite like, and which also has it on the OM1. But I think if I give it a little bit of honest opinion, I think the GX6, potentially the G9 as well, will have a similar sort of sensitivity when it comes to eye and face recognition from smaller or from distance. So that means that if for portrait shooters, you should be able to nail the focus quite easily with these cameras here. And also now talk about subject tracking. The G9 Mark II also included a brand new a vehicle detection. So like it's a bit like the OM1, which now has train and car detection. Just no planes, but train and car, and together with the animal and human detection, which is what they had already in GX6. And but now with the animal detection, it also detects the eyes, which the GX6 doesn't have. Even it recognizes the animal, it highlights it in a box, but it doesn't highlight the eyes in the GX6. And I've tried it in a park the other day, and I can basically say that it doesn't track the eyes, so basically it will focus the body if depending on how the animal is angling from your camera and the lens, so you may not necessarily get the shot that you want. But with the new G9 Mark II, the animal detection does now recognize eyes with the animal. So that means that you should be able to get shots a lot easier by comparison. But this is something that we already enjoying within the OM1 cameras because it has that already. It does recognize eyes within animals and birds as well. So it's not a new thing at all. It just and kind of more like a catch up with G9 Mark II. So how do you feel about all this new features being added to the G9 Mark II? Do you think Panasonic is really aiming to compete with the OM1?
I wonder if Panasonic's doing it because everybody is. If everyone's doing subject detection, so I think you have to too. I myself don't need or rely on subject detection for the kind of photography I do, which is often revolves around photographing. I mean, if the G9 Mark II had a camera LCD screen detection mode, that'd be useful to me because I'm often shooting the backs of cameras, or or if it had a camera logo detection mode, that'd be good because I'm often taking photographs of people holding cameras. But the rest of the time I'm doing sample images of lenses and cameras, and it's really quite uncommon that subject detection is useful to me. And for all the times it is useful, there are plenty more times where I wish to hell the camera would stay out of it and let me choose what to focus on. But maybe I'm just an old Luddite.
And then I just obviously one comment just popped up, the latest one, Angelo saying that Tony Northrup has in his review video tested the eye subject detection on animals. Yes, it is on the G9 Mark II. I'm saying that it's not on the GH6 because I've tried it many times and it's just not there. It highlights the animal in a box, but if the let's say I was photographing squirrel the other day, and if the squirrel started to turn his head slightly angle away from the camera, the body will be in focus, but not the head. And then so like the focusing system doesn't actually detect any of the animal eyes in the GX6. The G9 Mark II, I know it does, and so it should be able to nail the focus just as easy as the OM1 itself. So that's interesting because obviously that's going to come down to later. Some people already seen asking the question about whether go for the OM1 or the G9 Mark II. So this is the big question, right? So we're going to answer that maybe towards the end of the live stream here. So the next big thing, obviously, that you can see that G9 Mark II also has is live composite and all this stuff that basically Olympus has been doing for years. And it does seems to me that, Panasonic is definitely upping the game in a way that they're trying to introduce more computational stuff, just like Olympus/OM system has done for years. And they're trying to attract, for certain, that more photographers to get into the game. And I know Panasonic has always had photography cameras, which is in the more lower end stuff, and definitely not in the pro level stuff like Olympus has. And this is an interesting step for them, I think. Having Pro Capture as well, we understand another thing we're going to talk about, the Pro Capture, and so they are really gunning for that action kind of creative, long exposure, things that Olympus OM systems camera has been known for many years, and a lot of little creators, they're trying to get something done in the most easiest, more convenient way, and certainly the G9 Mark II seems to be able to just approach a similar sort of direction, just like OM system has done. What's your thought on that, in terms of like adding computational stuff on G9 Mark II?
It does. The live composite thing seems like a Me Too kind of argument. Shouldn't be using that phrase in that context, but you know what I mean. It's like it's trying to do what Olympus or OM system has done already. I'm mildly disappointed Panasonic gave up with 4K photo and 6K photo, because although there are a couple of things around those that weren't ideal. Some of those features were rather good, like the post-focus feature. You might think, when would I ever use that? And then you try and you think, oh my word, this is extraordinary. I mean, just imagine you take a short burst of video. It's so short you hardly notice the duration of a close-up. And then you look at it in playback mode. And you can see one bit's in focus, the rest isn't. You tap on the screen in playback mode, and that instantly comes into focus because it finds the image
Yeah.
in the sequence where that bit is sharp. It's quite uncanny, but I don't think anyone ever quite got it, and it's a
No.
shame they stopped it.
Yeah,
'Cause-
just talk about frame grabbing from 4K videos. You know, the latest TG7 can do that. So,
could
so that
could it do it before?
I'm not entirely
Could
sure
the
whether it can do that
TG6
before, but I'm certain
Nobody
the
is.
TG7 has that feature. My TG5
Okay,
doesn't have it, so so I'm not entirely sure whether TG6 has it. But the TG7, one of the features that you can do frame grabbing from 4K video. So if you shoot in 4K, you can grab a frame from it, and as a JPEG. So 4K is about 8 megapixels, so it's actually usable, you know, and depending on what sort of thing you're going to use it for.
But just to put my propeller hat on, presumably the TG7 is only going to be shooting long GOP compression anyway.
Yeah.
So if you do grab a frame of that, it's going to have to kludge it together, isn't it? From other frames. So it may first it's going to be 8 megapixels. That's your lot.
Yeah.
Secondly, it might not be great.
Yeah,
but there we go.
there we go. And so apart from these couple of big features and in the photography terms for the G9 Mark II, I mean, all of you are listening. All of you may have already seen the review videos online and probably read some of the specs already. Any other features that you think the G9 Mark II definitely stand out, you know, comparing to you know, I would say the more direct competitor, the OM1, you know, whether you feel that certain things G9 may be better than OM1, I'm not entirely sure. But obviously one thing would possibly better than the OM1 in terms of number-wise, I'm not saying applications or real-life use, is resolutions. Obviously, the G9 Mark II has the latest 25 megapixel sensor, which is, you know, quite a bit more than the OM1. OM1 is 20, and so, you know, I already made my case about using the 25 megapixels only because I needed to. But in reality, I don't need it for my own personal stuff, and it's only satisfying my agency's, you know, my work stuff more than anything else. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about resolutions in the next episode, Rod. We're supposed to be doing it this week, but we're going to do it for next week. And but, you know, obviously increasing resolutions has a lot of potential impact and on your not only your workflow, but also to the collection of lenses that you currently have. If you don't already have the latest, perhaps the more advanced lenses in your collections. For those who've been shooting with older cameras with 12, 16, maybe even 20 megapixel sensors, has some of the older lenses from the Micro Four Thirds lineups, perhaps 8 to 10 years old lenses, you may find if you do upgrade to the 25 megapixel, I'm just saying, suggesting you may be shocked by the results because you may come across as soft. And when you blow up, you know, to 100%, and so only because some of these older lenses are not designed for these sort of resolutions, and even though it has IBIS, you may also find a lot of movements if you're not careful with the shutter speed and so forth. Having high resolution sensors definitely has this caveat, and then when it comes to you know, shooting, and you just have to be a little bit more careful about that. And Rod can tell you a thing or two, you know, he's been shooting with a lot of high resolution cameras, and so I mean, I think that 20 and 25, you know, Rod can tell you, you know, whether it's a significant a difference or line to be drawn between the two, or is just simply a, you know, a marketing thing.
I think it's definitely worth having. I wouldn't buy the camera just for that, but I don't know what the M43 format is a 4:3 ratio, which is fairly square. So I think I've heard you say, Jim, in the past that you tend to like 3:2 ratio. So you're already doing a little bit of cropping.
Yep.
So any extra resolution,
yep,
I guess with the G9 Mark II, if you do shoot 3:2 ratio images, it's still going to get around 20 megapixels. Where if you do it with a 20 megapixel camera, you're getting down to what, 17-ish, which is starting to get a little uncomfortable. I don't think the increase in resolution is going to show up any obvious differences in the lenses. I think that's been a slower process because the G9 20 megapixel sensor, I think, was already quite capable of showing up any weaknesses in older lenses. And some of the older Panasonic lenses
Mm.
were launched when MFT cameras had 12 megapixels, or
Yeah.
what's the one after that? What came out?
Uh,
16.
yeah.
And they were just about all right. So I think it's been a steady evolution. But if you go back to some of the older lenses now, I mean, I've got a 14 millimeter f2.5,
Mm-hmm.
nice little lens, but it's not good. It's not good at all.
No.
And the latest cameras show that quite clearly.
Yeah, and hence I was suggesting, if you are considering getting the G9 Mark II for stills, or video for that matter, and you just need to have a look at your collection of lenses there, test it out yourself, whether the 25 megapixel will play good with your collection of lenses. Otherwise, you probably have to factor in upgrading, the cost of upgrading your lenses to some of the higher end pro level lenses to get the quality, to get the best out of the 25 megapixel sensor. I think that's probably what I'm trying to say here. Okay, and let talk about sensor. I think that's also another interesting thing, because I have seen DP reviews videos on both the GX6 and the G9 Mark II, and the latest G9 Mark II video that they posted has comparing the GX6 dynamic range, because they both have supposedly similar sensors, if not the same sensor, the 25 megapixel sensor, and they are confirming that G9 Mark II has better dynamic range at the lower ISO range. So that's interesting, because I've never really too bothered about the original GX6 review, and when they talk about the dynamic range being inferior compared to other 20 megapixel micro four thirds cameras beforehand, and because I got a GX6 for just to do my agency work, and I can tell you that in real life use, I always shoot a lower ISO as low as possible anyway, just to make sure that I could massage the file a little bit better when it comes to dynamic range for that reasons. I don't see actually a big difference between the GX6 and the OM1, supposed to also have a very good dynamic range in the micro four thirds sensor. And I actually don't see a quantifiable differences when it comes to pulling highlight down or pushing a shadow up at all. So I'm not entirely sure their findings, and perhaps like I've never done any lab kind of like control environment test when it comes to dynamic range with the latest 25 megapixel sensor, and but in real life use, I shoot a lot of high contrast scenes with my subjects, and I can tell you that I could easily pull the highlight down just as easy as the OM1, or pushing the shadow up, just like any other micro four thirds camera I used before. So I don't see a significant difference or big enough difference that they would have to make it a news basically. So obviously, like I said, I'm not doing a scientific test here. I don't have a control environment in the lab to do that sort of test. And but I'm just telling you about my real life shooting experience, and that's all. But they said, in the videos, and also highlighting some of the clips there, the G9 supposedly have slightly better performing shadow, especially noisy shadow areas compared to the GX6. If that is the case, that means G9 potentially will have slightly better image quality when it comes to raw shooting and pushing shadows and things like that. So that's going to be interesting in that case. But how good it is, and I think that no one can confirm at the moment, because G9 Mark II, any of the reviews that we've seen online at the moment are running beta software. So none of them wanted to say out loud, okay, it's definitely better than GX6. It's definitely better in the or the best within the micro four thirds system. So that's going to be interesting. We just have to wait and see. I think Angela actually just asked that at the end. Has G9 Mark II dynamic range as all-in-one? I guess you're just comparing them to. I kind of give you the broad response just now. I said it's probably very similar. I won't say which one is better, because I never look at it that way. I don't even look at numbers. I just play with the files when I'm editing my photographs. They are just about the same. If I'm being honest there, so I don't see a significant inferior or better, whatever. I can't compare them to. And but in terms of editing wise, they are just about the same. Okay.
I have spent years working on laboratory tests for cameras and lenses, and dynamic range testing is one of the most troublesome. I don't know what DP Review used. Where I worked, we used DxO Analyzer, which is like a customer version of DxO's own testing software.
Yeah.
And you have to make a whole series of assumptions before we can test dynamic range. So with that software, you have to shoot a raw file, then convert it to a TIFF file without any further adjustments,
Yep.
and then use that as a basis for measuring dynamic range. This doesn't take into account any shadow or highlight adjustments you might be able to make in your software.
Yeah.
And it also assumes you either use the manufacturer's own raw software,
Yeah.
in which case you're using different software for different cameras,
Yeah.
or use one that's available for everyone. So that'd be Adobe Camera Raw, which has its own issues because not every profile in Adobe Camera Raw is equal.
No.
So the figures you get and the data you get from dynamic range testing looks extremely authoritative and precise. But there are so many assumptions and compromises and decisions you make to carry out the testing that you're kind of in danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't tell you how much recoverable highlight detail there is if you don't try and recover it.
No.
So it's difficult. I have used the GH6. I have done a bit of shadow and highlight recovery on that. I've not seen any difference. If DP Review and others can find a difference in results, I'll take their word for it. But I'd be interested to know how it was tested.
Yeah, I mean they have shown the graph in the GX6 review, and also in the G9 Mark II videos they recently released, also shown the same graph showing the the differences in terms of low ISO range, in terms of dynamic range, which is about 1 to 1.5 stop worse than other Micro Four Thirds cameras, because 1 and 1.5 stop is quite significant. But like I said, when I come to real life use, I actually can't really see that. At all, definitely not, because 1 and 1.5 stop is quite a lot. When you're trying to pull highlight and things like that.
And just to answer Angelo's question, I'm not saying that the test methodology is flawed, but in order to have any kind of test methodology, you have to standardize on a whole bunch of things that don't necessarily reflect real life shooting. Real life shooting, people do too many different things in too many different ways. You can't reflect that with the test. You kind of have to pick a fixed lowest common denominator test that you can repeat again and again. And that doesn't always reveal the full subtlety of the images or what they can do.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of misconception with photographers, especially modern photographer, digital photographer more specifically, is that people may have misinterpreted dynamic range and the use of dynamic range more like when it comes to post editing. And to be quite honest, if you are a professional or high level photographer, you would not purely just relying on dynamic range to rescue your images. So in terms of high contrast stuff, and if your subject is backlit strongly with the sunlight behind, and no matter how good the dynamic range of a camera, you will always find clipping depending on where you're gonna set the datum points for your exposure. And so in that particular case, you will have to use artificial lights to help to balance the scene a little bit to get to basically recover some of the details that have been lost by blown out. And so in that case, a photographer have to introduce light, which is what a high-end photographer would do and should do when it comes to high-level shooting, because they should not and will never actually relying on the dynamic range of the cameras to do any sort of data recovery within the image itself. They will try to maintain as much information as possible, and obviously the higher dynamic range would help, and so you don't have to maybe pump so much light in or whatever. And but in that sense, if you start introducing light, anybody can do it, even with like 10 stop dynamic range cameras, because you can balance it quite easily with more light in. And that's why people are still using speed lights, using strobes and things like in outdoor shootings. In fashion photography, it's the same thing. The reason why they do it is because, well, they're trying to do exactly what I just said.
Or if you're that worried, you bracket your exposures. If the shot's that important and the contrast is that high, the safest thing to do is just shoot a series of brackets and either merge them or choose the best one.
Absolutely.
And but this idea of testing dynamic range, you could open a raw file in JXO Photolab, in Capture One and Lightroom, and get 3 completely different impressions of how much usable dynamic range there was. The highlight recovery is pretty similar in all 3, but the shadow recovery and what the darker tones look like is quite different.
Yeah.
So this is what complicates any kind of dynamic range testing.
Yeah, we can certainly do another episode talk just on that itself. Yeah.
No.
No, we don't want to open another can of worms. So that's about the sensor, and I'm not sure how you guys feel about it, and because I know it can be a little bit confusing when it comes to dynamic range and resolutions and the new sensors compared to the older sensors, but I think we all agree one thing, right, is that any digital camera since 2012, I'm talking about older cameras, not just Micro Four Thirds. Any digital cameras, it's more than capable of producing brilliant results. That's a fact. And if you somehow misjudge the exposures and underexposed by 2 or 3 stops, you have a badly exposed images, and that means no matter how good the software is in editing, whatever sensor, it's still a badly exposed image. So the best thing to do is to learn your photography, perfect your skills, and make sure that your photograph is perfectly exposed in the first place. Don't rely on the technical advancement to rescue your image, and that's I think will probably a better way it puts it. As a photographer, the best thing to do is to master and hone your skills in photography and learn your exposure triangles, learn how to frame and creative a way to compose your photograph and execute the timing, more than the actual technical advancements of any sort of cameras that we have these days. Because if you are a skillful photographer, you can use a 10-year-old camera and still create really stunning results. But no doubt, all these new technologies are good, very good indeed, but they're only assisting. They're only there to assist you to do things perhaps be better, a bit quicker, a bit more accurate, and that's for sure. So that's the G9. That's the G9, half of it, of course. Well, why is half of it? Because G9 is also somehow marketed as a hybrid camera, and so this is where the line is being drawn between the two main Micro Four Thirds players, between OM System and Panasonic. And Panasonic has always been a good, very kind of prominent and also very proficient in the video side, because that's what they're known for, right? When the Micro Four Thirds came out, and when the Micro Four Thirds is about 4 to 5 years old, people kind of mention that, if I want to shoot videos, go Panasonic. If I want to shoot photos, let's go to Olympus. And that's kind of like the norm, and but G9, the original G9, kind of starting to split, this kind of line, trying to blur the line a little bit. But G9 itself, especially after the major firmware update, was capable not only just in still, but also video. And now G9 Mark II has kind of takes things even further, because it's now not only is a capable still cameras, but in the video side, it somehow make it like a mini GX6, because it does almost everything the GX6 is doing, and which is interesting, because we talk about the face detection AF, which is the main selling point of the whole thing, but the video side, the codecs, the frame rate, you can shoot C4K 120, these sort of things that is quite high end, it's something that the GX6 was built for, and now you can get it in a G9 Mark II, which is a lot cheaper compared to the GX6. That's interesting.
Is it though? Is it?
Well, not current street price, but I'm talking about launch price, because the GX6 launch price was about 2,200, I think, or maybe $2,500. But the G9 Mark II is significantly cheaper.
I think if you look at it right now, they might be quite similar. But in fairness to the GH6, the GH6 does have CF Express Type B slot, doesn't it? And yes. I've got a feeling it shoots Apple ProRes internally, and it's got some rather better, higher quality codecs than the G9 II. Having said that, do you think people are in danger of overestimating the video specifications they need in a hybrid camera?
Absolutely, I think so. But then again, I think something that we have to kind of bear that in mind is how consumers see products these days. It's more than it's not just about what we need, but it's about what we want.
Well, people get nervous by buying a camera that
Yeah.
doesn't have numbers as big as some other camera.
Yeah.
So people get nervous if they see that, say, the GH5 II, the full frame one,
Yep.
can only shoot 4K 60 in Super 35 crop,
Yep.
to my understanding. Now that gets a lot of people nervous, and they think, should I be getting a camera that can do full width 4K 60, even when they've never shot 4K 60 in their lives?
Yep.
So do you think people are just chasing specifications out
I
of all proportion to their value?
I think so. Well, and I think so because we have to thank Apple for that.
Do we? Do we?
Well, since about, I will say since about 3 to 4 years ago, and since one of the first iPhones can shoot 4K 60, and they have put into the language that kind of glorify these half speed slow motion kind of look in the more cinematic way, and they have done it in a way that basically consumer will understand, and because of that now everyone think, oh, 4K 60, if I want to shoot cinematic, and I need to have 4K 60 or anything 60 frames per second. And obviously if you have that option, I would go as far as, whatever resolution can max out in the camera. So if it can shoot 4K, I want 4K 60. If it can shoot 5K, I want 5K 60. So anything with 60 frame. And this is something that's been done.
And somebody on YouTube says, oh, you want Apple ProRes,
Yeah.
and your regular codecs.
You don't want Apple ProRes. I can tell you that your 1 terabyte memory card will not will not last long.
No, but this is what makes people nervous. It's become like an arms race, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Even if it's something you're never likely to use, I would never shoot ProRes for the reasons you just said. But even so, if I had 2 cameras, and one of them shot ProRes and one didn't, I think, I don't know. Maybe I ought to get the one that can. And you just get drawn into it.
You do. Unfortunately, that's the reality in consumerism, and you just want the best things, right? If you can afford it, you want the best thing.
Yeah.
And so, in that regards, and in the video department, the G9 Mark II has definitely trumped over OM system or any Olympus cameras before that, because in terms of video specs, it's definitely on paper looks very glorified. Like it has all the necessary frame rates that consumer wants. And but what puzzles me between the G9 Mark II and the GX6 is that if I take out the CF Express card from the camera, and it would not allow me to choose 4K 120, it would not allow me to do a lot of things. But in contrast, the G9 Mark II has 120 frame in 4K, but it only records to UHS-2 cards. And so it allows you to have that option with only the UHS-2 card in the camera.
Maybe it's 8-bit or 420.
It could be a 420
compression.
That could potentially be the case. And obviously, I have not tested the cameras, and I don't think many reviewers have actually touched base on that particular point there. So I'm quite hard to figure out exactly what's going on there. But I know for a fact that the GX6, if you don't have the CF Express card in the camera, it would not allow you to do C4K 120. You can do up to 60 frame, but you can't do any 5K videos or any sort of high speed shooting. And so I'm curious about that, because if they can do that in the G9 Mark II, why can't they do it in the GX6 using just SD cards?
It's probably the compression and bit rates and stuff like that, but I think it does raise the question I had earlier. I think in principle, you would say the type of compression you use, everyone would say, oh, long golf, that's a bodge. I want all intra compression. Apologies to anyone who's bored by all this video jargon. I'll keep it brief. The point is, it's quite hard to tell the difference unless you do some really serious editing, really slow things down, or try to freeze a frame, or you get some issues with very rapid movement. You're talking about spending twice as much money to get a marginal gain. That's the thing. So I think it could well be that the G9 II is every bit as good as most videographers need. And to just go back to an earlier point about frame rates and cinematic look, I'm guessing what you mean, Jim, is with 60 FPS, you can play back at 30 or 24 for a
Yeah,
slow motion effect,
that's right.
not to record at 60 FPS and play back at 60 FPS, which isn't a look that a lot of people like.
Yes, I mean,
But
yeah, because Apple is very known for selling certain features,
yeah,
and ever since when they did 4K 60, and they've been showcasing a lot of iPhone films, short films, and things that are using 60 frame and
yeah,
slow down
yeah,
half speed, if quarter speed, and just to make it look, kind of I don't know, they certainly make the cinematic word, more cinematic just by trying to brainwashing people with all sorts of marketing terms and
I
and
think
some glorified pictures.
slow motion covers a multitude of sins as well.
Yes, and
Even choppiest, nastiest footage looks all right played back slow.
yeah, even Angela say that cinematic is 24 frame per second, and I think when Yarnot also said that 60 FPS is not anything but cinematic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, to be quite honest, a lot of this high frame rate recording and filming is mainly reserving for sports
Oh,
coverage in the
well,
past.
keep it
Yeah,
around.
sure. And it's not really designed to for any sort of cinematography for purpose, because you need certain kind of look and certain kind of motion blur to create that effect, and that's what I call cinematic. And unfortunately, this is the way it goes, and a lot of consumers, a lot of beginners may not actually understand it and think that shooting high frame rate, slow it down, is cinematic. Well, I have to say it does look good from time to time, but if you use it all the time, it's definitely not something that you want. So this is interesting thing about the G9 Mark II, and I think that it's certainly the G9 Mark II has created a lot of buzz and excitement since yesterday, and the rumor has been bubbling and boiling for the last 2 months, and I think the the G9 Mark II certainly deliver in terms of kind of answering a lot of questions about Michael Four Third in general. First of all, and is Michael Four Third dead? Is Panasonic has abandoned the Michael Four Third? Well, it obviously is now know that it's confirmed that it's not. Panasonic is still continue and also committing to the Michael Four Third platform. GX6 last year, now with G9 Mark II. But the question still remains though, and Rod, let's have a little talk about this though, is that you and I both talked about, the entry-level cameras in both the OM systems and also Panasonic. And well, not just them, though. Even like, overall pictures in any sort of manufacturers. It seems that, the entry-level cameras are slowly disappearing. And what's your take on it? Do you think Panasonic would still maybe at some point releasing a lower-end camera, or they just going to sod it? I'm just going to concentrate on the top end market. G9 Mark II, kind of like semi-pro, pro model. The GX6 will be the pro, or at least for the Michael Four Third system for the pro video shooting. And so it's OM system, they're concentrating on the OM1 and also OM5, which is OM5 semi-pro. And yeah, what happened to the, EM10 series or the GX90, whatever, all these lower end Michael Four Third cameras?
Yeah, I think Panasonic has dumped those. I think that's fairly clear. It's unfortunate. I think they're making them for a while longer until they're all sold, because the margins presumably are quite good. But I don't think there will be any more. On the OM system side, we've still got the EM10, and hopefully there'll be an OM system replacement for that. The only, I would say, getting outside MFT brands at the moment, hats off to Canon for doing some cheap APS-C EOS R format cameras. Pity they're not making any lenses. Don't get me started. but the EOS R100 is cheap, and with Nikon you've got the Z30.
Yep.
Admittedly, it's kind of like what we once might have called an influencer camera, but it's quite cheap. Not cheap like cameras used to be, but I think Panasonic has pulled away from that completely. So you'll still be able to buy some cheap Panasonics, but I wouldn't expect there to be any new ones.
So that's interesting.
I think also I wonder if they're just showing more interest again in MFT, because they're feeling a little queasy about the chances with full frame, because the S1 and S1R haven't exactly gone very far, have they? And good
Yeah.
as the S5 is, you can't just sell one camera.
Yeah. I just look at Steve's latest comment here, and Steve actually said, I think it's safe to say that the smartphone has consumed the low end market. So what do you think of that?
I think low end is true. The sort of people that might have bought a Canon Digital Lixus or some Panasonic point and shoot travel camera would now use their phone. I think that's true. I don't think the lower end market is the same as the beginner market. The beginner market I see as people who want to actually learn about photography with a camera that gives them some control and some
Yeah.
potential. And I think you still need a camera for that.
So
You
that's
need a proper optical zoom, and ideally you need to swap lenses too.
Yeah, that's it's quite interesting because now, we all know and agree that the smartphone has completely wiped out the point and shoot market, from all the camera manufacturers. It's quite far and few in between now that they see anyone releasing new point and shoot cameras, apart from OM System just released the TG7 this morning.
I'm not sure I call it point and shoot. It's not a cheap camera.
It is not a cheap camera.
No.
But we come back to that, and but I think that as soon as the smartphone has introduced multiple lenses in the system, when they're starting to have ultra wide and tele, and also increasing the video capabilities and also computational photography, kind of like alleviate a lot of the shortcomings what a smartphone could produce, like let's say 5-6 years ago, and the advancements in the computational side, especially, is quite significant. And I actually just ordered the the iPhone 15, and so I'm curious to see how much it has advanced, because I have a lot of iPhones in the past, and I could see the differences in image quality. Not necessarily the actual sensor improvement, but the computational side of it, how much they process multiple layers and from the information that it extracts and combine them together to create a almost noise-free image with a very balanced exposure, even though the sensor is not capable of having that sort of dynamic range. So it's actually a very interesting thing to see that they have done that. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why people think that, I shoot better pictures with smartphone compared to bigger cameras. I'm talking about like from the beginner levels or people who are not familiar with photography. It is quite true in that sense, because you hold up an iPhone or any sort of latest smartphone generations, you hold up a camera in a high contrast and you just press the button, take a shot. You see the result, without too much manipulations. That you got to balance exposed photograph. You don't have to do too much of manipulating, photoshopping or editing to get something. And
it's a lot harder to muck up an image with a phone than it is with a camera.
Yeah.
But phones do stuff. You just mentioned HDR. If any recent iPhone, it'll shoot an HDR image which looks as good as anything you could create. Well, you could do a better job with the camera if you don't mind spending an hour on it. But if you just want to take a picture and it's done, the phone is extremely good at it. And you can go out now under regular suburban street lighting, where a few years ago you couldn't even contemplate handheld photography.
No.
You take a picture with your phone and it automatically keeps shooting for about 3 seconds and does a composite, which is sharp and noise-free. You can't do that with a camera handheld. So, and if you want a panoramic image, there's no smoother, neater, better way than doing it with a phone. Do it with a camera if you've got an afternoon free to sort it out.
Yeah.
But a phone can do it just like that. So I think that has helped kill point and shoot cameras and steal a lot of the lower end market, when people see that phones can do things that they couldn't do easily with a camera.
And I guess, for those people who are considering buying low-end cameras, is that, for the price that you have to pay for a low-end cameras plus lenses, it's an extra expense, because they're not really serious about photography. They just want something, to shoot around. And in that case, they already have a smartphone. Why pay extra, and to get another a set of equipment there to do an occasional photo snaps around holidays and things like that. So I can kind of see that. But then again, I kind of feel that, we still need beginner level cameras or entry level
Mm,
cameras for the
mm.
fact that, a lot of really genuine photographers, beginners who really want to, learn about photography. I think they need something that's low end, that's cheaper, affordable, not necessarily have to pay like 1,500 quid, 2,000 to get a camera plus lenses, even though you can get, lower end lenses. But now the entry level ticket to get into a new camera is over $1,000 easy, for any sort of cameras. And because lower end market doesn't exist anymore, like you can't find a camera that is £400, £500, and it's really hard. So I think it should keep it. But then again, I can understand from a business perspective, if it doesn't sell, it doesn't make enough money to cover the R&Ds and all the other stuff. It's a tricky question here.
It is. If only we could still get the cameras we used to be able to buy for $400 or $500 or pounds. Like one of my old favorites was the Nikon D3500. I know DSLRs have gone out of fashion, but this is a camera that cost 400 quid. And the lenses were plentiful and quite cheap. I'm afraid
Yeah.
those days are gone. They
Yeah.
done. If only they carried on making them, but they didn't. So
No.
we're stuck.
So this is why, I kind of go back to the point about G9 Mark II is that I think their launch price at this moment in time is very aggressive for Micro Four Third.
I just checked, by the way, Jimmy. The GH6 is cheaper.
It's cheaper.
Cheaper at B&H, and I haven't checked Wex in the UK, but it's
but then cheaper. Again, this is the street price, current street price, not the launch price. So potentially G9 Mark II in a year time, it will come down by 200, something like that. You never know. And so that's interesting. But then again, I'm just talking about overall launch prices. So like I think the pricing of the G9 Mark II certainly is going to have an impact on the follow-up from any manufacturers. Because
I have a feeling it's about the same as the G9 was when it came out.
But that's 6 years ago. The original G9.
No, I know. But
yeah.
If we're going to talk about launch prices,
yes.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that this is an aggressive launch price that seems no higher than Panasonic was asking for the G9 6 years ago. So yes, I'm agreeing with you. It's quite an aggressive price.
That is very interesting because I personally thought, like that's my original assumption. The G9 Mark II will be near the 2000 mark, and then so they came out a lot lower than that, and that makes me think now if Olympus System gonna release a new camera, and the pricing could be significant decision make a factor there. Like if the next flagship Olympus System camera is going to launch above 2000, and you got a G9 launch price as 1,700, 1,699, and then that could be a big thing there, because that difference there is equivalent to a lens. So in the Micro Four Third terms, so it's going to be an interesting tactics here, and how Panasonic not only trying to gain market share, but also trying to cannibalize within the Micro Four Third realm between Olympus System and themselves, and then they are certainly thinking about that, and especially now you can see from a specifications point of view, the G9 Mark II is very close. Although I wouldn't say it's the same as the OM1, but very close to OM1, which is definitely more focused, stills focus camera. And I still think if you really purely just shooting stills, I would still probably would go for the OM1. I'll probably answer the question of some of the people who asked earlier. However, if you do fancy some high resolution shots, and the G9 Mark II will probably be the only way to go, because none of the Olympus System cameras has anything over 20 megapixels, and so if you want something higher, and G9 Mark II or the GX6 will definitely satisfy in the resolution terms. But in terms of features and performance, and I personally would go for the OM1, but like I said many times, the best thing to do is still probably go to a camera store and try it yourself and see whether you do like the handling. Like I said earlier in today's live stream, I don't personally like the handling or the shape or the form factor of the G9 Mark II. Or actually, apart from the G9, original G9, I don't like any of the high-end Panasonic camera body, the grip especially, just because it just doesn't fit my hand too well compared to Olympus System cameras. I even think the original G9 feels better in my hand than the GX6, and that's a fact. So so you gotta have to try it yourself to see whether it fits you better, whether the image files are better for you and for your needs. Take a few of your own lenses to test out as well. If you've got some old lenses, make sure that you're still happy with the performance. If not, you may have to factor in the cost of upgrading your lenses as well. So that would be interesting.
I don't know. I think this has always been a position for any camera system and MFT as well, that the whole business of upgrading lenses, I don't think this latest camera has made enough difference in that respect. But I do think, as with any brand, there's a big difference between the pro lenses and the consumer lenses. And it's the same with OM system. The consumer lenses are not really, they can be good, but they're not really in the same league as the pro lenses. And it's the same with Panasonic, with Canon, with Nikon. It's the same pattern. The consumer lenses are adequate, but not stellar. You have to pay to get the stellar lenses.
Yeah,
so
there's a reason why they cost 3 times more.
I'm afraid so.
Not just the size, but the actual optical performance of the lenses.
I'm afraid so. Yes. Yeah.
Right. So that's probably what we want to talk about the G9 Mark II, and maybe we can scroll through some of the comments and can answer, and maybe start having a little bit of a discussion with you guys about what we just talked about the G9 Mark II. But before we do that, let's have a very quick look, or a quick overview, and talk about the OM System's latest point and shoot, which Rod is denying that is a point and shoot camera, the TG7. So I have the original TG5 here. Well, not original. The original will be TG1, but there you go. That's the TG5. The TG5 and the TG6 is essentially the same camera, and even the shell is exactly the same. It has a couple of new features and the new LCD screens at the back. The TG7, however, it's got a brand new shell. It has technically the same sensors and the processors, but there are a couple of good features that's been added to the camera. I have not tested yet, but the camera I know that is being sent to me, so I should have one to play with very soon, so I will report in full when it comes to my hand. But as far as I can tell, the TG7 is definitely up its game in terms of some of the criticisms received in the previous generation, the TG6, one of which is the USB-C charging finally arrives in the TG7. And then I don't know why they never added to the TG6, because mini USB is quite an old tech by itself. And so if you want to charge a TG6, you have to carry extra cable every single time. But now you can use the same USB-C cable for that. And also, like we mentioned earlier, now you can do 4K still grab in the video. So if you shoot 4K videos in TG7, you can grab any frames within the video clip itself as a photo, JPEG. So that's quite handy. And there's a new construction mode. That's an interesting thing, right, Rod? I don't know if you heard of that. It's essentially a mode that will basically, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lightroom, but in Lightroom we have something called the dehaze function in the or slider. So basically, if you've got a hazy situations and very foggy situations, if you kind of push the dehaze slider to the right, it will kind of enhances the black, basically bring out all the detail back a little bit to show what's behind the fog and things like that. You can't recover it fully because if it's blocked, optically it's blocked, but it does enhance it so you can see more or less more than what you would what the original image would look like. But the TG7 has a mode built in, so the image, the JPEG image that will output is already got the dehaze kind of feature been pushed up, so you can see more in a dusty environment. So supposedly will help construction workers in a dusty environment to take some photographs. So that's going to be interesting. So I can't wait to test that.
That was the one killer feature that's always been missing. So I'm glad it's here at last.
But obviously the main killer feature is still the same thing. Being a tough camera means that like it's drop proof, it's freeze proof, it's crush proof. And like Rod actually earlier said that people will probably go for the GoPro or anything like that. And I agree. Depending on what sort of content you want to capture, And I think for a lot of, like, let's say snowboarders, mountain bikers, they were still going to go for the GoPro, you know, because they want to record the actual action itself in video terms. But TG7 or any of the tough cameras before, it's not really a video camera, even though it shoots 4K videos, but it doesn't shoot anything in high frame rate. And I know you can do 120 and 240 in a lower resolution terms, but it's still relying contrast detect, and also it doesn't have actual sensor-based stabilization in videos, so it's not really a video camera, but it allows you to take actually quite okay videos in good daylight, but it's still more as still cameras. And I find that in still images is actually really good, and especially in good lighting conditions, it still retain the same 12 megapixel sensors as before. I think they want to keep the photo size as big as possible. They don't want to increase the resolutions and to introduce more noise. It does have an f2 aperture, just like any of the tough cameras before that. That means in lower light situations, you should be able to get some still shots that is good, because it has in photo modes, it has sensor-based stabilization, and so that is still pretty useful for point and shoot cameras. Yeah, I think ultimately, I think I'm a little bit excited about it, and I can't wait to have it in my hand to test it. I know Rod would say otherwise, and and he prefers the GoPro. He prefers the GoPro and the action.
Well, I'm only thinking about the audience, really. I think the audience for a tough camera is probably a lot smaller than the audience for an action camera. I mean, GoPros have got basically like 3 buttons. And for most users, that's probably 2 buttons too many. So something like the TG7 is just, they're just going to go, whoa, I don't know what to do. So,
well, having said that, I did read some comments this morning in some of the early TG7 videos review or preview, and people are suggesting they should have more buttons. Like a menu mode and compensation, this and that. They want more, not less.
I think if you're 10 meters down in shark infested water, you probably don't need more buttons. You probably need fewer buttons. You just want something that's simple to operate. I think you just got to think about the context these cameras are going to be used in. You're probably going to have gloves on. You probably might have goggles on. Yep. If you're on a construction site where you're surrounded by dust, then you can have safety glasses on,
and you got thick gloves and everything.
So these cameras have got to be direct and simple as well as rugged, I think.
And I guess just like before, the tough cameras are aiming on a very very specific market there. But what I can tell you, if any of you are family man or family woman, and if you want something that is instructable, I can highly recommend this video, this particular camera, whether the older TG5-6 or whatever, the latest TG7. This camera here has been with me, with the family, for at least 6 years now, and it's been kicked around by my kids, and dropped into the water, dropped into the stream everywhere, and it is still here. It still functions. So if you want something that doesn't destroy, if you got the if you don't want to destroy your $2,000 camera, one of these would definitely do the job, especially with younger kids and who doesn't look after stuff, or occasionally distract you by dropping your camera. So this thing would definitely survive. Okay, so now let's have a look at sorry,
I'm going to throw you a curveball, Jimmy. Do you think you could ever have a tough mirrorless camera?
Oh, yes, I would like to see one, though.
We already have.
Oh, the Leica?
No, Nikon 1 AW1.
I thought you were talking about the Leica APS-C one.
No,
you know which one I'm talking about.
I think I do, yeah. But the Nikon 1 AW1 actually was a camera that people could afford to buy. That didn't last long, unfortunately. Nikon 1 system didn't last long, but it can be done. It can be done.
I think, well, I know a little bit sidetracked it. I think the Nikon 1 system is a good system, but I think it was a little bit too early. I think it's a little bit too early. I think the technology just wasn't mature enough for mirrorless cameras in general. Back then, there was no hybrid AF. There was all contrast detect AF. It's very slow.
If actually, the Nikon one did have phase detect
Has
AF.
it?
I've got one.
Probably
Yeah.
the later one though. The
But
earlier one are
no,
definitely all contrast,
Nikon
right?
1J1. I think I've got the first one, the cheapest version of the first model. I'll check. But I do think if they could have hung on
Yeah,
until the Sony 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor came out,
yeah.
that would have made all the difference, because that's not a bad sensor. And then the system would have made sense.
Uh,
So, but hey, sorry, I distracted you. Carry
no,
on.
no,
What
no,
were you
no,
going
no.
to say?
I just found a funny comment here from Andrew. Surely the
Oh,
TG is mirrorless, and also why is it not called prismless? Called mirrorless.
pointless. No, it didn't say that. Um, yes, it is. It is. Lots of cameras are mirrorless. That all compact cameras are mirrorless.
Yeah.
The
To be
thing,
honest,
thing,
like even rangefinder cameras are mirrorless, because
yeah,
because it hasn't got
yeah.
a mirror, and
It's
yeah,
got
it's a
a tiny mirror, in the
in the
top.
rangefinder itself.
The range, yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's start to have a chat with you guys, and I'm gonna have to scroll back and to some of the comments here. But let's walk backward and to see whether we go from the more recent one and work backward there. I know
I
it's
did.
not.
I did
Sorry.
see one.
Yep.
So
Go
you
on.
might have to scroll back a bit for me to find out who said it. But the comment was, is the G9 Mark II just a way to get people into full frame? And I think that's an interesting question,
Hmm.
because
Okay.
with Canon and Nikon,
Yep.
definitely, but with Panasonic, there's absolutely no crossover between Lumix G and Lumix S. There's no compatibility whatsoever between the two systems.
Yep.
So you cannot buy any Lumix G gear, cameras or lenses, and then migrate to a full frame Panasonic S. You have to start again. And I think going to be a big handicap for Panasonic. Other makers have ranges that cross over.
Yeah.
Panasonic's, it's like there's still shutters between Lumix G and Lumix S. They
Yeah. I
look the
mean,
same. The some manufacturers the same, but if you want to swap from one to the other, you have to start again from
absolutely.
scratch.
Absolutely. I mean, and so far I haven't seen a Panasonic release an adapter that will, basically transform the
No,
micro four thirds lens to full frame lens.
I would imagine the flange distance for MFT is just too short.
Yeah. Yeah.
That can only work if you're going from a longer distance to a shorter one. I think MFG is probably, I don't know, I might be wrong. It's probably shorter than L mount, but whether or not it is, nobody's ever made one, and it doesn't look like they ever will. So there
No.
is simply no crossover.
And this is also why the original speculations when Panasonic has moved over to full frame and thinking, like they may have abandoned the micro four thirds because they now have to keep two systems simultaneously,
Yeah,
and continue to do R&D in two separate directions. And
yeah.
that is a very costly exercise for Panasonic because they now have two completely different systems running simultaneously, even though they both have joined an alliance, so they're not developing things by themselves. So you can still use L-mount lenses from Leica, from Sigma, and so forth. And micro four thirds obviously can use OM system lenses, older Olympus lenses, or anybody who's making micro four thirds mount lenses. And so in that case, they are not in a fairly bad position, but internally for camera developments, definitely, because they have two separate sections they have to do, which is completely different, by all means. Even though it may look similar, it may have similar features, but in terms of development, it's very, very different altogether.
So I think that is a bit of an issue for them. The only way they can get people to move from Lumix G to Lumix S is just brand loyalty, and
Yeah.
that's not a very strong thing, is it? If you've got to sell all your cameras and all your lenses
No.
to upgrade, that's not great.
Yeah. And
But,
if people are looking for full frame lenses, they would just go for the full frame side and not vice versa.
well, yes, you'd have to,
Yeah, so it's a bit weird. But Angela also say that Fuji also has two systems. That's true. Fuji
yeah,
has
yeah,
APS-C
yeah.
and also medium format, and they have also pushed it as well, and which is actually good for them with the latest
think-
release 100S, and then Mark II,
I
wasn't it?
think
102.
I think what Fujifilm did something Panasonic didn't. Fujifilm basically was pushing on an open door with affordable medium format. The only other contender was Hasselblad at twice the price,
Yeah.
which are technically not as polished in my opinion. So Fujifilm saw a gap and they've really used it. Panasonic saw a gap, but they're like competing with a bunch of other makers that are doing it every bit as well.
So
And I'm talking about full frame cameras.
Essentially, what Fuji did with the medium format cameras, that they want to be big fish in a small pond, rather than a small fish in the sea, you know, and
exactly,
which is what Panasonic's done. You know, now I'm competing with all the other full frame manufacturers. I'm also competing with all the micro four thirty. Yeah,
and
so,
I think there's another slightly off topic issue as well, that the Panasonic's always struggled with the reputation of its DFD autofocus. I think a little unfairly, because I think a lot of people forget that that's only one style of filmmaking. If you look at companies, if you look at cameras, cinema cameras designed for TV productions, commercials, ads, or more advanced filmmaking, you have a focus pulley. You don't use autofocus.
no.
So something like the Black Magic Pocket Cinema cameras, they barely focus at all. But it's a different style of filmmaking where you mark a spot and your talent stands there, and you plan a focus pull from one thing to another.
The reason why cine lenses have gears is, and also they're all manual focus, is for that precise reason. If you're a filmmaker, if a camera guy working in the film industry, you know that not many, if I say ever, use any sort of autofocusing system. They're all manually done, and they have a separate guy just to do focus itself in any sort of filming industry. And the autofocus side is really mainly for modern content creators who film themselves, and because they, if you're just a one-man band operating the entire thing, you need something to help focus you. So like you need the camera in front of you and just keep tracking your face or your body whenever you walk into frame, and but if you somehow rich enough to have a second person that operating the camera, and then you don't really need to have autofocus, because that guy can operate the focus and wherever you go. So I think you're right.
I think it's kind of like the difference between recording things that happen and directed filmmaking. Because if you're directing the filmmaking, you're in control. You choose where you focus, when and how. If you're recording things happening, that's when you need autofocus, because you have to react and you don't have a lot of time.
Absolutely. And I think Angela made a point there actually just now. He said that mirrorless video is aimed at camcorder market with who wants better quality. He has a point though, I think. Yeah, I think he has a point though.
I know plenty of filmmakers who shoot mirrorless who wouldn't appreciate being called camcorder users. There are some serious users out there. It's a costing as well. If you can get a mirrorless camera that even if say a Sony A7S III costs you $4,000, that's a heck of a lot cheaper than an Arri or a Red.
Oh no, for sure. But I think he has a point in terms of camcorder market. So people who used to buy camcorders, are the people who, mums and dads or whatever, dads more likely, and then when they go to travel, they just want to record some clips, when they go traveling, and they want something that just basically press a button and record, and you don't have to worry about focus, exposure, anything. And because mirrorless camera these days can shoot very decent videos, and perhaps even better than camcorders in most cases. So if autofocus stacks up, and then essentially having a very glorified camcorder in the camera itself. So and many of them are taking video clips in that way, and even though they're not technically a video shooters or filmmakers by any means, but having a kind of dependable AF system kind of in a way that perhaps makes them feel better when it comes to recording some clips.
For sure. I'm afraid I might be one of these people who use a phone though. Well, the camera. So I was on holiday last week. I
Yeah.
was on a boat doing a trip up the river Tamar,
Yeah.
and it's quite choppy, and the boat was bouncing around a bit. But I
Yeah.
was filming the docks as we went past with my phone, and
Yeah.
the stabilization was just breathtaking. I haven't used a mirrorless camera that can stabilize video like that, and I think
Mm.
that's what camera makers are up against. Um, and the other thing is that with the phone, autofocus is no longer much of an issue because there's so much depth of field. They don't have to do a lot of focusing anyway.
No, no, that's
So,
true.
so in a sense, if you try and film if you try and film camcorder style video with a mirrorless camera, you're
Mm.
choosing a technology which is giving you problems you then have to try and overcome in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. That's
Sorry.
that is definitely true, because I had a cam I still have it actually, the Canon camcorder, and I still remember using one of those with the tapes. My one was the tape,
Yes, yeah.
not even the SD cards, the tape
No,
ones.
no, I'd say, yeah, yeah.
The tapes, yeah, I actually kind of like them, and I know it's a bit feeling a bit nostalgia now, but I think they were quite cool.
Yeah.
Especially when I wanted to use that's way before the smartphone can capture any sort of decent videos.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
all
yeah,
it was always like 480, it's very low resolutions and
yeah,
badly exposed, and a lot of them are over clipping and things like that. And
yeah.
but camcorder did a much better job at the time, and even they were only 1080. But yeah, it was reliable, it works, and it lasts all day almost, and I don't have to worry about battery, even though you have to lug around another thing in the back, and but it works. Okay, let's have a look at the other comments here. I had some beeping there. Let's see. Let's go back a little bit more now. I think let's go back to some of the original G9 comments there. Right, almost to the top. So anyone, and I'm still welcoming any new comments. If you guys are listening still, any of you, how you're feeling about the G9 Mark II announcement, and how do you feel, in terms of the G9 Mark II comparing to the OM system OM1. If you're considering getting a new micro four third cameras, which one would you prefer and why? And I think this is something that we are going to have a little discussions here with your comments. So please do, and fill in the chat room here, and we're gonna go through all of them if we have time. So let's see now. I got one here now, and so Carl has been using G9 for 3 years plus, and I want a new camera, but I'm going to have to wait for my birthday. I'm going to miss the top screen. Yes, this is the top screen thing that you mentioned. I still think, yes, you're right there, Rod, earlier, and they missed a chance there. Why didn't they keep the top plate in the design? I think it's a silly mistake. Personally, only because I'm a still photographer, but mostly, and I think it's a good photography feature that should have been maintained and not kind of rid.
Well, I think where I notice it is cameras don't have shutter speed dials anymore. Most lenses don't have aperture rings, but the top panel is a way to see those two settings clearly.
Yeah,
you can switch your rear screen just to show status information, and then you get nice big numerals. But generally, you want that for live view, don't you? You can see it in the viewfinder, but your shutter speed and aperture are always going to be quite small. At least with the top panel, you can see those two key things, big and clear, without taking up any of your other displays. So I missed them for that reason.
Absolutely. And speaking of aperture rings, and I personally think that camera manufacturers should bring back all the aperture rings to their lenses. It's just definitely a way more intuitive way to operate, and also to see the settings without having to go through screens, EVF or whatnot. Anything is all physical, is all right there. When you look down, that's it. I can see the lens is set to 1.4. I can see the shutter speed, and the shutter speed dial is 1/1000th of a second. Everything's right there without having to go through anything electronic. And I think that's something that we need to do.
Especially if you're trying to get grab shots like street photography or at a wedding, or just the other day, I was testing a lens. I asked a chap if I could photograph. He had a little dog in a kind of pouch, and a really cute dog. But dogs don't like you pointing a camera at them. So it's much easier if you can just do your settings, then bang. But if you're doing this and the dog's watching it, it's going to turn away or look in the wrong direction or do all this other stuff. It is better to put the camera to your eye ready to shoot than it is to put it to your eye, then do all the settings. That's a nuisance.
Sure. And also another commenter from Michael, and here I've seen heat testing suing probably about the G9 Mark II. It only overheated at 6K video. Using test using.
I think that's what it means. Yeah.
Yes. I think you know what, and I know we talked about it. You know, the G9 Mark II doesn't have any fan or any sort of ventilation within the body design, and so far from at least all the reviews that I've seen so far, that the camera doesn't overheat when you shoot 4K or 4K 120, whatnot, anything like that. It is true, and but I guess the reason why the GX6 has fan or any other high-end S5 II, for instance, have fan is not just about overheating under normal or prolonged shooting, but also under different circumstances. Let's say if you put because obviously a lot of tests here that's been done so far are not extreme tests, are also not a real life tests, so to speak. I have used OMD cameras and other cameras filming weddings in direct sunlight heat. You know, like cameras are all black. You know, if you can see where I'm coming from now. If you're shooting a wedding in a bright sunny day in the summer, and you can easily, you know, have it 32, 33 degrees under direct sunlight at any one time during ceremony outdoor. If you plonk the camera on the tripod, filming the entire process for half an hour in that sort of heat, the camera can easily go up to, you know, in service levels, probably go up to about 40. And internally, when you're filming at 4K, whatever resolution you set it to, you can get to very high temperature. And I think that is the sort of scenarios when the G9 Mark II could potentially fail and overheat just because it hasn't got any ventilation system. And this is when the GX6, this sort of system is tailored for that kind of scenarios, and that is probably still why the GX6 is still kind of more of a professional level filming machines compared to G9, because G9 is not marketed as a professional filming machine. It's more of a hybrid / still photography camera. And so I think fan definitely has its usage depending on what sort of thing you're going to be using for. Not everybody's going to shoot or film for a prolonged period under direct sunlight heat like I just mentioned, because it's a very rare occasion.
It may be, but I can imagine maybe in your situation, if you did a kind of event where the bride and groom wanted 2 camera angles filming the entire ceremony, you are going to have to leave a camera running for 30, 45 or 60 minutes unattended without having to worry about whether it's going to shut down.
Yep. It's a professional features, you know, on reliability, basically, you know, and it may not happen, but you never know. And but having a ventilation that automatically kicks in, you know, when the camera gets a little bit too hot, the fan would just come on just to cool it down a little bit. Is definitely helpful in that instance. So you can kind of rely on the camera. You don't have to worry about it. Like you said, leaving it unattended, because a lot of videographers out there who operate as one-man band is at most 2 people, unless you have a big budget for that sort of filming. And in that case, you know, a lot of videographer tends to have 2 to maybe 3 cameras in different angles to covering the whole scene, and that means that one is operating and the other 2 will be basically there stationary for the entire duration. And in that case, you need to have a reliable cameras that would withstand that sort of temperature, and to make sure that, you know, you capture the thing, not just basically overheat and shut down itself and you miss the whole half the ceremony. And your client will be happy afterwards. Yeah, that's for sure. So I think in that sense that you can clearly see the line being drawn there. The G9 Mark II is, even though it's capable of doing what the GX6 does, it is still, you know, a very rare occasion. And I think fan has its definitely has its uses depending on what sort of thing you're going to be using for. Not everybody's going to shoot for a prolonged period under direct sunlight heat like does, but it's definitely not going to be at the same level in terms of usage, and also in terms of reliability when it comes to extreme conditions. And that will be my take on the GX6, between the GX6 and the G9 Mark II, and so as the G9 Mark II versus the S5 Mark II, which also has a fan. And at the moment, no one can really confirm or deny whether it's effective, because G9 Mark II is only came out, it's still running beta, and then most consumer will get their hands on in the next couple of weeks, and only time will tell, whether G9 Mark II is as effective and as reliable as the GX6, in extreme condition.
Yeah, I think there's more variation in how filmmakers and videographers work than even with stills photographers.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to, if you spend a lot of time on YouTube, it's very easy to get the idea that video is only ever vlogging and single shooters and a particular POV style of filming. That is just a tiny corner of filmmaking.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's why I have so much variation in the equipment. So I think you make a very good point. I think the GH6 certainly would be a very much more, you'd have a lot more confidence in the GH6 as a static camera for long filming events than you would a kind of more amateur camera.
And I guess, I guess if you're going to rig it up to a proper filmmaking machine, you probably want to rig up the GX6 then the G9 Mark II, just because all the extra fan, extra things, that you can attach to. And like we said earlier, for real filmmakers, these you're going to rack focus manually anyway, not going to rely on any sort of auto-focusing system, and that means the main features of G9 Mark II is basically not relevant to those filmmakers because they don't use them anyway. And so that will be my take. And Anthony is kind of having this reflecting a similar concern that I had. And do you think that this is a push that OM system needs to be forced to bring out a new camera with high specifications? Well, I'm not going to confirm or deny anything, right? And but I'm going now. I think it will make OM system think a little bit, and that's for sure, because the from a specification standpoint, the G9 Mark II definitely have a little bit of a leeway when it comes to comparing between the two. First of all, numbers. We can see the numbers is definitely favoring the G9 Mark II from resolution, from frame rate in the video terms. A lot of things is definitely a little bit better in number terms. However, in the real life shooting situations, if you primarily a still photographers, you will definitely find that the OM1 probably still ahead of the G9 Mark II, and for speed, for ruggedness, and also for tracking purposes, and also computational stuff. Because don't forget that G9 Mark II, even though that it has live composite now, but it doesn't have live bulb, which a starry sky AF, and these are things that are very specific and very useful for certain type of photography, and many people think that live composite is great. It is great, if you want to do something such as light painting and also a fireworks shot, that would be quite cool. But live bulb is very useful for a lot of nighttime and long exposure photography, and that's something that G9 Mark II doesn't have still. And then so it's not all there. So it's not just about comparing numbers in that case, because like we said many times, I know Rod just said, if given a choice, he would go for the high resolution specification anytime. And but in reality, how often do you really utilize all these 25 megapixels or even 20 megapixel? Because a lot of the time you are viewing things on screen, on computer screen, iPad screen, or whatever, in iPhone screen. You don't necessarily need to have that sort of resolutions. And we have this discussion way back in when we first started this live stream about resolutions, and so it's not all that. So you just have to kind of make the case yourself to make sure that the G9 Mark II appeals to you in a very specific way. It has to be very direct, very specific, because otherwise you're going to confuse yourself which system to go for. Because and like I said again, I'm going to reiterate that you're going to have to try the system, try the camera yourself between the two to make sure that, oh, it fits in my hand better, this one and there, or which one the file I prefer, and or better still, compare the two cameras yourself, when you go back home, put the memory card into the system, blow up the picture side by side, and just to see the differences using the same lens that you have, and to see which one come out better, or better still if there's not much difference in terms of resolutions, and you got your case there. Okay.
I think Andrew mentions live bulb mode. That is a game changer. It took me a while to get my head around it. but if you do any kind of night photography in low light, it is just changes everything. So essentially, stop me if I misunderstand any of this, but essentially, or I'm explaining it wrong. You leave the camera running, the exposure builds on the back. You no longer have to guess what the exposure should be and stop it. You look at it and say, that's enough, and then you stop. The only thing you've got to be aware of, if it's dark, your LCD is going to look brighter than the images. But it's just such a great feature. I've never really used live composites so much, because that seems to me a harder concept to figure out and a more limited value. But live bulb is brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I use both. I use both in different scenarios. I mean, I'm not a nighttime or long exposure photographer by default, and but I've used live bulb, and I remember the old days before live bulb came along. Doing long exposure photographs is a guesswork. It's really hard to kind of nail the exposure. Sometimes you just do way too long, and just the whole thing gone white, or just under too much, and you can't see the details, and it's really, really hard to judge. But live bulb is a lifesaver in that sense. You can really see the back screen building up. You say, oh wow, you can see this. Oh, that's the time now. Okay, you stop it right there. That's brilliant. And if you shoot raw, you can still have a little bit of leeway, by half a stop to a 2 stop, and so it's really, really good.
The main thing is you can judge it so that the image is bright enough, but you're not clipping the brightest parts, which is where regular long exposures are quite hard to guess at. Can I ask you, do you find your Olympus lenses focus just as quick on the GH6? I'm not talking about continuous AF necessarily, but for stills and single AF.
I mean, I don't see a significant speed differences between the OM1 and GH6, and so I find it almost as quick. I mean, I couldn't really tell the difference, but I don't have a lot of Panasonic lenses to compare with, so I can't really, just use it as a 25 mil on a Panasonic lens compared to 25 on an Olympus lens. And also because I'm using a lot of pro lenses, the pro lenses does have faster motor by default. So I didn't use any of the 1.8 primes, for instance. So I wouldn't be able to confirm that yet. And because so far I've been shooting professional shoots, I'll use pro lenses. But for that, I think that they're quite quick. And so I think it's quick enough for me to do everything. So I don't see the difference between them two.
So I could be quite tempted by the G9 too, but not by Panasonic G lenses. I'd rather still use my OM lenses. So I just thought I'd ask you that. I think I found that Lumix G lenses to be slightly slower, or at least the ones I had on an OM body. But the other way around, if it's still quick enough, that's fine. I could be tempted.
I think so. And I think Jose, just an interesting thing as well. I'm just bringing out his comment here. The G90 tries to catch up with a lot of things that OM1 already has, even the older OMD cameras. I think more specifically the live composite that we just mentioned, and also it excels in the video departments. Perhaps OM can address these shortcomings via firmware updates. The reason I bring up his comment is about firmware updates, and it is true in a way that the OM system did promise us that OM1 should receive a number of firmware updates over time, and we did have a few updates, but most of them are bug fixes and also introducing new profile for new lenses. So we haven't seen a proper update in terms of features or any sort of enhancement to the actual camera operations itself. So it would be interesting, and I think we should be far away now to see a major update, simply because it's now the OM1 is now 18 months old, or maybe a little bit older than that now. So we could see something, you never know, and before the next flagship come about. And I think what excites me the most is what OM system is going to do next, and not just about firmware, but also future developments in the next flagship camera, only because we're now seeing Panasonic has to throw a spanner into the ring now, and with the G9 Mark II. And like I said, it's all numbers comparison. It's nothing significant. But then again, we also talked about consumer perception when it comes to number comparisons. And it does make a difference when it comes to buying decisions, and especially when they are both Micro Four Thirds mounts. They're both doing similar sort of things, and feature by features, if you do really sort of detailed comparison, of course you will see the differences. And like I said, in real life shooting is probably very similar as well. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think we just have to wait and see. I don't want to speculate anything or trying to spread any kind of false rumors around. And but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen around the corner.
Yeah, OM Systems needs to get that sensor. They need to buy up a lot of these cameras, poke them out, and put them in their own.
Well, we talked a little bit about that way back now. Remember Sharp wanted to make an 8K video camera, and for 8K you need a 35-40 megapixel sensor, and they 40. They had a prototype. That means that they were using a 40 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor, and so things do exist.
Unless they were upsampling.
I don't think they'll be as cheeky as upsampling.
I think I have seen a Sony patent. I mean, patents mean nothing. For a 100 megapixel MFT sensor. But this was a few years ago.
That wouldn't surprise me.
lots of patents never get made. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is all about perception. I think the video side, particularly, I think probably the OM1 and even the OM5 are at least as good at video as most people actually need. But it's the perception. It's the perception that they're not. That's the problem. And that's what happens when you compare specifications.
Yeah,
you buy a camera that's better at something you don't need. It's like you get drawn into a trap.
Yeah, it's so true, because I've been making short video films for companies for the best part of the last 7 years, and I mean I shoot mostly things with OMD cameras, and that's before OM1. So all the best we could do at the time is 4K, C4K 24. So I shoot everything in 24, and then there's nothing wrong with that, and that's what everybody does in filmmaking. And so I shoot most of the stuff for the last, God knows how long now, with only 24p, and with great results. It's all about how you execute the shot, how you plan the shoot, and things that make sense of everything in terms of cinematography. Not so much about slowing everything down to make them look cool and play some music behind. And filmmaking is not just about that.
The thing is, if you try and film that stuff, it's like 10 times the work. If you just film things as they are, pick a resolution, pick a frame rate, there's only you there. There's a limit to how much you can do. If you then try and start messing with slow and quick modes and trying to figure out different frame rates for a bit of a slow motion B-roll or whatever, suddenly the whole thing is 10 times more complicated, isn't it? But have you ever been tempted in software just to do a bit of speed ramping and leave it to the software to kind of interpret?
I did that, and the result is very mixed, depending on what sort of thing you're doing. To be honest, if you're shooting something fast moving, and if you're trying to slow it down in post, when you don't have enough frames to interpret, it can be really bad. And but if you're a very slow moving subject, it can be quite convincing to do it in post. And Topaz has a video AI software that could actually introduce intermediate frames by using AI to kind of fill in the gaps, basically, to make it does look kind of half speed. I wouldn't say go as slow as 120 kind of thing, but if you shooting 25, you can kind of do half speed, like almost like you're shooting 50 frames per second, and it's pretty convincing in some cases, but I wouldn't say all the time. You still have to kind of pick and choose.
Do you think this is where the difference between all eye compression and long got might appear, or do you think not?
It's debatable. I think that, you know, they're probably about the same, to be honest. And
no, I agree with you. I think there are lots of things that should be better in principle, where you can never see any difference in practice.
No. Just answer a question here from HS Cheng, and I'm an OM1 user. I find the AFS is rather inaccurate when it comes to dark and single color scene. I always have to change to APS-C for it, which is kind of annoying. But would G9 Mark II solve this? That's an interesting thing. I don't think I can actually answer that.
I think I've heard people complain more about the OM1 AF compared to the EM13. I don't know if that's connected, but I think a lot of systems do go a bit awry in low light, regardless of how sensitive they're supposed to be. I went to the launch of the Lumix S1 and S1R, which they're both DFD systems, but they have very good sensitivity in low light, allegedly, except that when you come to do it, it was just very unreliable. So I don't know. I don't think you can look at the specs and work out the answer. It needs somebody to test it, really.
I mean, being a long-term OM1 users and now like using DFD and the GX6, and I can say a thing or two about these sort of focusing inaccuracy. I do find that the OM1 tends to struggle a little bit when it's backlit, and then that's when it struggle. But then again, you know, even DFD will struggle a little bit, but in comparison, I do think that DFD does a slightly better job when it's a very strong backlit situations. So if the subject is kind of in the dark side, basically when the sun is behind the subject, and I do find that DFDs tend to nail the focus a little bit better than the hybrid AF in the OM1 system. And I'm not entirely sure because it's just different algorithm, just because it's contrast based compared to just a face detect, because they're very different calculations there. Having a backlit situation, you're trying to look for the darkest bit, you know. So when you're in dark, and I think DFD may actually come a slightly better in that case. So I'm not sure G9 Mark II will solve this, simply because G9 Mark II is now also having the hybrid face detect AF. So it's only time can tell, you know, when users starting to start shooting all kinds of scenarios and different situations, and that will be able to answer that question more accurately. I think at this moment in time, everybody's playing with the beta versions or the pre-production samples, and no one has actually used the camera in real life situations. So it's going to be really hard to basically directly answer this particular question set. But like all cameras, like any cameras in the in the world, whether it's micro four thirds, APS-C or full frame, even medium format, they will struggle at some point depending on lighting situations. And I don't think that there's any different to any sort of system.
No, I've used plenty of systems that struggle in bright light. If you're photographing specular highlights or sunsets, for example, they can just go completely in the wrong direction and not be able to get back. So they can only focus on something. If you want to focus on the sunset, you have to shift the framing so that the sun's not confusing the AF. I've had that plenty of times. But also, I think the other factor with autofocus is that the lens has to play ball as well. Just because the camera thinks it's achieved focus, the lens still has to get there. So I think with pro lenses, you're not really going to have that problem. But I've used plenty of consumer lenses where the camera says, right, there's the eye, there's the face, there's the animal. But the lens isn't just quite quick enough to get there. You know, because there's a difference between the camera confirming focus and the lens focusing. You know, one kind of anticipates the other. So depends on the lens as well.
It certainly is. And some dude, good name.
Yeah.
Some dude.
I know.
Are buyers wanting a mini GX6, or would they prefer a better body and perhaps more in photos? I think Panasonic is going to a weird place.
I don't think you could do a mini GH6 because you need the stabilization, you need the processing power, you need the cooling. It's a shame you can no longer get things like the GX8 or the GX9 or the smaller ones, because that's, you would have thought, where the format was
Yeah.
strongest. But then we're getting back to that debate about beginner cameras. But I would have thought, I know,
Oh, we still have one, the
21.
OM5s right here.
But I would have thought that if you're going to go for a video vlogging influencer style market, first of all, should never have dropped the pens, should just have stuck in a more modern center.
Yes.
And secondly, you have to remember that people want, not to be sexist about it, people want a camera you can put in a handbag. People want a camera that looks quite nice. It doesn't look like some male techno fetish fantasy.
A fashion
and also,
statement.
A camera that you can put on a modest size gimbal, and the gimbal motors can handle it. So something light, small, that looks nice. It's not an outrageous thing to ask for, but they stopped making them.
Well, I had a live stream last week when you were away, Rod. We talked about should Michael Four Thirds go small again, and I think that that's what the system was built for, is the size and weight. Earlier we talked about the overall system size. That is obviously very true.
Yeah.
But then again, you just also made a point, from the influencer's point of view, from a more consumer point of view, not everybody wants a big heavy camera. They just want something light and easy. And even from the casual, vloggers and things, who use a gimbal, for instance, like you said there. How often do you take out a Ronin 3S, whatever, the big gimbals, like a Dune 3,
two-handed jobs, yeah,
and a big camera with a massive 1.2 lens in front, with all kinds of things attached to it. It's a hassle, just to set up itself. Then you have to film it and you pack it up again when you leave, and it's not an ideal situation for any sort of content creators who are on the move. And having a small and light system, just easy, right? Just chuck it in the bag, take it out, and
in a perfect world, you've got a mirrorless camera light enough, you don't have to balance a gimbal. You just stick it on and off you go. But that's never going to happen with a GH6 or a G9 II. I take some dude's points. Something like a mini GH6 has in more photo orientated camera. I think most of us were quite like that. But I mean, I think the thing about MFT is that the continuing strength of MFT is that the lenses are small. This is about the only format where you could make a camera kit that small, and you could make a camera kit that you can put on a gimbal without needing to balance it. Exactly. Or the EZ 14 to 42 lens that hardly extends when using it. You only have to balance your gimbal once, and from then on you just put the camera straight on the gimbal and off you go. So I think they're overlooking what seems to me a very obvious market.
This is how tiny the 12mm f2 is. It's just gorgeously small when it comes to a prime lens, and then it's just brilliant.
So I think there was another question in the comments. So Tanker Bruja, I hope I said that correctly. What would you say to those who are just going to say, well, why not just go full frame? Lenses. Have you ever paid for? Well, I'm sure you have. But the cost and the size of full frame lenses, forget about the camera bodies, the lenses, any lenses, full frame lenses that are any good are big and expensive. You can get some cheaper, lighter primes, but they're not particularly great. The good lenses are big and heavy and expensive. That's the reason not to go full frame. The cameras are great, no problem with the cameras. It's just the lenses.
It is. Buying camera is only one thing, but it's, if you want to create images, you need lenses. And as soon as you get into photography, then you're starting to realize, good lenses, it's something that you probably want to dream of. Not actually the camera body itself, but actually the camera is the lens that you want.
Your 12mm f2.
Yep.
That's my Canon equivalent. I'd say it's about twice the size and twice the weight.
Yes.
Luckily, it's about the same price, but this is very compact for a 24 1.8.
Yeah.
They're not all like this, but this is still quite a big lens. So
yeah,
that is why not full frame, really.
Absolutely. And if you look at this one here. I mean, I got the Lumix version here, but the Olympus
is that the 12 to 32.
Yeah,
that's just crazy.
This is a zoom lens that covers 12 to 32. So in full frame is 24 to 64. In a size like this, it's literally a body cap. It's just a very small, tiny lens, and that fits in a pocket. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant little camera. When you mount it on a GM1 like this, it's
Hi, got GM1.
I got a GM1. Yes.
Ah, can't believe it.
Look at that. Look how tiny this is.
I know.
It's just incredible.
Ridiculous. So this is I think my issue with Panasonic. I think it's doing all the right things with the G9 too, but they've got too serious. They're overlooking a massive market for things that are smaller and simpler and lighter.
Yes.
So if you go trying to do any filmmaking with the G9 II, first of all, you've got to up your game. You've got to your filmmaking skills have got to match the capabilities of the camera. We all feel that pressure, I think.
Yes.
And secondly, it's going to take you a lot longer to get it kitted up and ready to shoot with. If you put that on a gimbal, you've got to get a bigger gimbal. You've got to get it balanced every time you shoot. And if you're using a zoom lens, you probably ought to balance it every time you change the zoom.
And imagine you're chucking this on a gimbal.
You'd balance it once and then forget it, wouldn't you?
Yep, absolutely. This is what Michael Foster should do again. Just something tiny, something tiny. And this is essentially a point and shoot size. This is a point and shoot camera. It's just so small.
Yeah. Have to go on mpb.com, buy one if you can still get them. But
they are going for quite a lot of money these days.
I know. I can't afford. I should have bought the 12mm f2 when they were still sensible money, but they're not anymore. New or secondhand. But yeah, I think that is what Panasonic is missing. I can't believe that market has gone away, because I always thought the Olympus pen cameras hit the nail on the head and did it perfectly. That's how they managed to make 10 different iterations, no different to the ones before. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure.
It's Ohm System should still be doing that, and Panasonic should still be doing that, because I think there must be a huge market there. Huge market. But what do I know?
What do we know? And just going back to what we similar to what we just talked about, Sixtus say that there's a really expensive part of building camera R&D as optimizing algorithms such as autofocus stabilization are transferable between Panasonic S and G. Yeah,
it's transferable for Panasonic, but it doesn't help the consumer, because they might ultimately pay a little bit less because the R&D is transferable, but the hardware is just entirely incompatible. If only that wasn't the case.
Okay, Mark here. I really don't like the fully articulated screen for photography first camera personally. The fact that the shell is the same as the full frame camera will make people turn to full frame, in my opinion. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I saw DP review also said the same thing. On the GX6, the screen is a very cool screen where you can actually flip up, like this.
Yeah.
So why can't they do that with the G9? I know photographers like the flip up screen like this. They do like it because they can look top down. And then, but this one also flip out. So if you really want to use it for filmmaking, you can also do that at the same time. And I think it's a pretty cool screen, personally, even though that I'm more of an OM system user, but I think this screen is pretty cool because you can do top down view and when you flip up 45 degree.
I think I would automatically have said a vari-angle screen was better until the day came when I had cameras that had them. And that changed my mind. Part of the problem is because it has multiple axes of movement, you spin it to the side. And if you don't have it fully at 180 degrees to the camera, it becomes quite difficult to figure out how to straighten up the camera. And also, it does to me. Also, you don't have the screen on the same axis as the lens. So you're kind of looking like that. And I suppose the other thing is the mechanisms never feel as strong as the cameras themselves. It always feels like one day you're going to be in a hurry and you're going to twist it off, or you're going to walk through a doorway that's too narrow and give it a whack, or you're going to move the camera quickly and catch it on a wall or whatever. So I kind of miss my EM1 Mark 1 for that reason. It's a nuisance for vertical shooting, but actually for regular horizontal shooting, tilting screen's quite good.
Well, this is why I think that a lot of photographers still want a kind of flip up screen and rather than flip out screen. And, I liked it in the original EM5 and also the first OM1, not OM1, the EM1 Mark 1, and when they had the flip up screen. It's certainly more a photography preference, and especially those who are used to shooting top down, such as some of the older TLRs, cameras and things like that. Because you look through the viewfinder through from top down, and I actually kind of like that. If you shoot waist level photography, so you just have to look down and just shoot it that way, and it's much easier than flipping out and then turn the screen, and then it's definitely not as user-friendly from a photographer's point of view. That's for sure. However, I'm not disregarding the latest flip-out screen only because I now film video as well, and sometimes, most of the time I film myself on YouTube channel, so having a flip-out screen is definitely a lot easier than attaching an external monitor on top of it. That's for sure, even though it's quite small if you want to see it from distance, but still helpful just to see how your framing is like, whether it's too high, too low, whatever. So it's definitely easier in that sense. And vlogging, obviously good for vlogging as well, having a flip out screen. Okay, I may choose G9 Mark II because it has high resolutions and think panel will add new functions via firmware for software updates after years. Panasonic has that tradition.
Just remember, Panasonic also has a habit of charging you for software keys for things like Vlog.
Yes, well, they don't do that now, isn't it? Yeah, they could certainly they could.
I think you had to pay for the G9, didn't you? Didn't you have to buy a software key for log with the G9? I'm not sure. I think so.
The original G9, I'm not sure, but I know the G9 Mark II is got built-in Vlog.
I think everyone does that now. Yeah.
And hi Stan. Stan's Foxworthy is here, and so the old adage ring true. Yeah, they use the right tool for the right job. I hope we don't have a flurry of videos in a few weeks, and how the G9 overheats in video.
we will, because the whole point of YouTube, it seems to me, is testing claims, not testing cameras. So you'll have a certain group of YouTubers falling over each other to be first to test it to destruction.
It's almost
I
like
know Jimmy won't be one of them. He's not that kind of YouTuber, but there are plenty who are.
Yeah, and also, that's just how the original Canon R5 got blow out the proportion, right? The overheating issues.
I know. I mean, this is not a camera you'd run for half an hour to film a scene. That's never the intention.
And 8K.
Yeah, I mean, shoot in 8K if you want to, but then you're going to have to spend as much on your new computer as you did on the R5 to do any editing. Does anyone do 8K editing? Good luck to you. That's not going to be fun. You'd have to do it with proxies, wouldn't you?
You do when they get to that sort of thing.
Then leave it to render overnight.
I know. It's funny
My nightmare.
how many YouTube channels and talked about, you know, oh, editing 8K video is great, this and that, you know, the latest Apple Silicon whatever max out, you know, then you can do that. Yeah, you are talking about a maxed out machine that probably cost you 15 grand. You know, like so like you know, we are talking about like normal consumers and content creators who may have a computer that's worth about 3.5 grand at max, you know, and
I
it's
mean,
not going to be as powerful as the one that most people are demonstrating online.
how many people upload 4K to YouTube? I think most people still do FHD, don't they?
No, I don't think so.
All
Now I think the stat says about 60%, 70% uploading 4K now. Yeah.
all the videos I'm commissioned to do at the moment, they want 1080, but maybe
Oh
that'll
no,
change.
commissions are different. You know, all my commission projects are 1080, and then
Yeah, yeah.
but upload YouTube uploads are usually 4K these days.
I don't
And
know. Okay.
I actually seen some 8K already on YouTube's, and but none of my devices, including the TV, is compatible with 8K, so it doesn't
No,
really make any
no,
difference.
no. A lot of so-called 4K TVs aren't really 4K.
No.
So I think that the tech has got a bit of catching up to do. But it's typical, isn't it? You get a figure, and suddenly everybody wants it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't. I think 4K is already stretching people far enough. I don't think we're quite
yeah.
ready for 8K yet.
I,
And
I
6K open gate filming, maybe if you're a pro and you want to cover all your bases, and you're
yes,
not quite sure what kind of delivery package a customer wants, that's fine. 8K,
yeah. No, the thing
difficult.
is having higher resolutions than 4K on a typical TV in terms of viewing distance, and I don't see the real benefit from it. You know, like unless you have a giant, massive screen. You know, like I don't know. I
Well,
just can't
well,
quite see it yet.
how are you going to get it delivered? It's only going to work with streaming services, isn't it? And then you're probably going to need a full fiber
We are a long way from
connection.
AK streaming. No one has the bandwidth yet.
Well,
Especially in the and especially in the UK, our broadband's still rubbish by comparison.
oh yes, oh yes.
It would be lucky to actually stream anything 4K smoothly you know, we're okay in
Yeah,
most of these
yeah.
big cities, but in a slightly more remote area, it would be lucky to actually get any 4K streaming.
I think mostly streaming services are probably going to be 1080, aren't they? Then
Yeah, yeah,
upscaled in the
yeah.
TV. But
Yes,
you but
yes.
you're sitting the other side of the lounge. You're not going to be any the wiser, are you?
No, no.
So it all works out in the end.
Yes. And
But yeah,
Tanker say that he loves the live composite mode, and the new one caps the brightest highlights, and they
okay,
don't get too bright, or which is great.
that's
Yeah, I
good.
mean this is why the live composite mode is great for light painting scenarios, because it never overexposed, you know, to any parts. You know, if you
Right.
even overlapping the lights left, right, and center, it never overexposes. So you always keep the brightest point just before clipping. So actually, it's very good for that. Um, let's see. JMT, I think they needs more of a competition for smartphone by MFT. Smaller bodies to go with the
Yeah,
smaller
yeah,
lenses.
exactly. Yeah,
GM series was brilliant.
for sure.
Yes, absolutely. We talked about it, and I really think that MFT, whether OM system or Panasonic, should really recreate something this small again, if not
I,
smaller. I think that will be really, really cool.
I also think MOT is the only format that can stabilize things halfway as well as a phone can.
Yes.
So, if you're going to pitch a camera as a smartphone upgrade, it can't be so far behind in these
Yeah.
things that people
Yeah, I mean
lose faith.
this thing's definitely great. You know, like I
Yeah,
really hope that it can. I mean, this thing's about 7 years old now. You know, like
yeah,
7 8 years old, and I'm pretty certain now with technologies that we have today now, you know, we can have a much more capable a camera in the same form factor, and that will be very, very interesting, you know. And this sort of body size is probably quite hard to fit in a 5-axis stabilization, but even the 3-axis,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then you still make it a much more capable camera, because this one doesn't have any IBIS at all. It has digital stabilization for video, but it's rubbish.
Right.
And then but for as a still as a still camera, yeah, this is a point and shoot, you know, but you can change
Well,
lenses.
the EP7 and the whole pen series, they're
Yep.
small enough. and they've got APS. I think the EP7 was actually 5-axis too.
Yeah.
So
And
it's not a big camera.
no,
It's
it
quite
isn't.
small.
I mean, if we really want to have some kind of stabilization, you can do this. I know it looks a bit silly,
Oh no, what are you doing?
but you can actually attach a stabilized lens onto GM1. You can see that. You know, I know it looks ridiculous, but it does work. You can turn on the lens IS and just let the lens IS does the stabilization itself, but it still works as some kind of a lens with a camera system with stabilization in this form factor.
Yeah, good luck with that.
But then again, you know, that shows the GM1 is such a cool camera because it's still as Michael Four Thirds camera, so you can use any lenses with it.
But I would say that if you can live with 16 megapixel sensor and no viewfinder, I would say buy a used pen while you still can, because when they're gone, we'll all be sorry.
You mean the Pen F or the actual pen?
The Pen Fs cost too much. They've got a cult following. I've just been the ordinary pens, the EP9, EPL9, EPL10. They were hardly sophisticated even at their peak, but as a form factor, it's a style of camera we might soon lose forever.
Oh, don't say that! Don't say that.
Well, it's true though, isn't it?
I really love the cameras, and Olympus started with the mirrorless with the pen camera. The EP1 was the first.
Yeah, I had one.
Yeah, it was their first mirrorless camera.
Yeah, I had a white one. Not sure about that, but
I really hope that they would keep the pen, you know, and then this is something that I really genuinely hope that they would keep the pen, not only keeping it, but enhancing it to the next level to make it you know, has a similar sort of capability as the OM5, for instance, but in a much more compact form factor, you know, and that will be good. That will be good. And I want them to bring back the accessory port as well, so you can attach external EVF. You know, having the vertical shooting scenario, you can flip up the EVF and things like that. That will be really cool if they have that. And I think I'm going to jump on it again.
I think the EP1 had that. I don't know how many successive versions did, but I had a little optical finder for the 17mm lens.
I think up to EPL8 they had the accessory port, and EPL9 they got rid of it, and because on the EPL8 you can attach the VF4, which is the last version of the EVF.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going straight on to MPB now to get one.
I looked. It was none available at the moment.
Hell. Yeah. But no, seriously, this is a style of camera that will soon disappear.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's sad.
How many cameras now? How many cameras out there still have external EVF you can attach? I think the Canon APS-C camera has it, right? The M50. I think it has the EVF that you can still buy, the VF2 or VF3.
Right, M50 or the M6.
Either one of them. I think you can still attach the EVF to it.
The M50's got an EVF. It must be the M6.
There must be M6
and the M6 too. Yeah, M6 and M6 too. Yeah.
So you can still get that. Or any of the Leica camera, you can still attach the external EVF, but they will cost you a fortune. The EVF itself costs you a camera.
I know.
Okay, and right, we're gonna wrap up soon, so let's pick a couple of more comments and then we'll go through, and then we can call it a day today. And but thank you again for all joining us.
I want Stan to sell me his Pen F.
Stan got one.
Looks like it.
Right.
Think so.
I missed too many comments now.
Yeah,
I'm
still no, he has. Through. Yeah, he's got a Pen F. I so should have bought one while I still could. I'm gutted.
Yeah, I have one right here, and it's a black one. I want to collect. I want to complete the collection. I want a silver one now. I just want to complete the collection and have the black and the silver one.
Am I the only person who hasn't got a Pen F?
No, it's definitely a great camera, and it certainly deserves more recognitions than it is. I think You know,
So
especially with the current craze of retro-looking rangefinder style cameras, you know, with the Fujifilm, the X100s and the X Pro, you know, it should deserve a lot more recognitions than this. If Olympus has kept it, you know, releasing the Pen F2, whatever, you know, and it might have continued the recognitions there, and perhaps built on it, just like, you know, the Fujifilm has.
I think that's an example of we've had this conversation before about stills cameras not really advancing very much. I think in terms of stills photography, you could have stopped at the Pen F and not
Yeah.
really missed very much afterwards,
No.
because it hasn't really gone very much further. For video, obviously not. But then you just buy another camera, keep your Pen F, buy another camera.
Yeah. And I guess MC has kind of basically summarizes today's chat. With the release of the G9 Mark II, Panasonic is reviving the interest in Micro Four Third and hoping that more compact devices will follow, which corresponds to the advantage of this format, the G92, GX92, and whatnot. I think I wouldn't say G9 Mark II alone brings the interest back to Micro Four Third. I think that started with the OM1, and then subsequently the GX6 and the G9 Mark II. I think combined together with the three cameras, I think that certainly has brought some interest back to the Micro Four Third platform. And you know, I wouldn't say just one by itself, but certainly they make it more exciting every time there's a new product come out. And yeah, I certainly think that the G9 Mark II has continue this flame onward, and then making it exciting for any potential Micro Four Third buyers or wanted to try out the smaller form factors in the systems. And I also think that the Micro Four Third should continue to advance in the computational size, and also perhaps at some point really once again bring out something tiny, you know. And I think a tiny camera with the sensors and the ability to change lenses will certainly appeal to a lot of people. Like Rod mentioned earlier, you know, some people might just want to, you know, put the camera in the handbag, you know, put it in a coat pocket, you know, just something tiny that you can carry around all day, you know, and that would possibly reignite this ultra small cameras, you know, almost like the point and shoot, you know, back in the days, because this will certainly take much better photos than the smartphone. You know, and even with this, you know, GM1, a 7-8-year-old camera, will still take better photos than any smartphones out there if you use the right techniques and the lenses. And you know, you can forget about fake bokeh. You can put in a proper fast lens then to get a proper shallow depth of field if you really want to. And so that's the beauty of having an interchangeable camera system. And so having a tiny one, yeah, that will certainly bring some interest and excitement to the system.
I can get an EPL 10 like new for £279. Shall I do
cheap.
It? It is, isn't it?
I thought you wanted the blue one, the EPO9.
Yeah, I looked for the EPL9. You're right. I did want the blue one. Yeah.
So while we're chatting away live stream here, Rod has gone away to look for a camera. So Rod is going to be busy shopping in a minute.
Oh, I haven't got blue one.
Oh. Dang.
Brown and white.
Right. Okay. And
sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm glad that you're excited about EPO9. Well, okay, and I guess this will conclude today's live stream, which has been going on for quite some time actually. And but I can see that you guys are very excited about today's chat, and so are we. You can see that we're very animated today about talking about the latest announcement. There are a lot more that we could talk about, but unfortunately we're kind of running out of time. We're running over time at the moment, and but yeah, it's exciting. It's very exciting, and to see a brand new Micro Four Third camera kind of continue the tradition in a way that what the system is known for. I do hope that at some point we can see some smaller cameras, not necessarily lower end or cheaper, but I just want to see something smaller that basically enhances the statement of Micro Four Third system. I know Rod and I talked about system size. Is still way smaller than any sort of equivalent bigger system, APS-C or full frame. But Micro Four Third is still by far the smaller system you can get.
you can also get better lenses for less money.
Oh yes, yeah, definitely. The price and is for sure. Pro lenses, in the 1.2 Pro lenses in the Micro Four Thirds, you may think it's expensive, cost you like 1,000, 1,200, but the equivalent of full frame will easily cost you £2,500, £3,000 easily for an equivalent full frame lenses. So yeah, it's definitely price considerations. But yes. And also at the same time, if you want something small, OM5 will probably kind of the only solutions at the moment in Micro Four Thirds platform. The OM5 is the smallest and perhaps the most capable tiny cameras for now. Until whoever brings out the next one, and we shall see. And but from Rod's comment saying that Panasonic may not gonna want to look at the lower end markets and a smaller with a smaller form factor. Hope that will change though. But OM system we're definitely going to continue the OM5 line or similar sort of form factors, at least an SLR style body, not necessarily the pen. And so yeah, I'm happy to see that OM system is keeping it and hopefully advancing it in years to come. Anyway, so this is today's chat, and thank you very much for joining us. And we are going to have another discussion next week. So remember to stay tuned. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and also to this playlist, this live stream will also be available as podcast on YouTube. Under the page level in the US, and not actually in the UK or anywhere else at the moment, but you can always play back and just listen to it if you want. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, and we shall see you all next time. So until next time, see you all very soon. Bye.